Okay, well, hello and welcome everyone. Good morning to those tuning in on the West Coast and afternoon to those on the East Coast. Thank you all so much for joining today's webinar. We are excited to be presenting this particular topic, especially as people are getting ready to go on the road and recruitment travel picks up. My name is Robin Gertra. I'm one of the partnerships directors with IDP Connect. I am delighted to be presenting alongside two experts representing institutions in both the US and Canada to provide their insights into smart travel and how they use data to inform their itineraries. Just a bit of housekeeping before I introduce the two speakers. The slides as well as a recording of the webinar will be shared in a follow-up email. Now we do encourage engagement throughout the duration of the webinar, so please do type in your questions using that Q&A tool at the bottom of the webinar window as we have allowed some time for questions. So I am very pleased to introduce my co-presenters for today's presentation. We have Katie Van Wyk, Director of International Admissions at the University of Arizona, as well as Gordon Schuster, Director of International Education with Okanagan College, joining us today. Thank you both for being here. So as for today's agenda, we'll start off with a brief introduction of IDP and highlight Events Hub. We'll then dive into today's topic, where I'll spend about 15 minutes going through the benefits, the challenges that come along with using data, as well as some of the sources available to you as an institution. I'll then pass it over to both Katie and Gordon to weigh in and share their insights, ending the webinar with a couple minutes of Q&A for the speakers. So a bit about IDP for those who may be unfamiliar. IDP is the global leader in international education with a clear focus on building trusted relationships with students, institutions, and with the sector. We do this on a global scale, placing over 50,000 students a year. And it's through our investment and our innovative use of data and digital technology that we've been able to scale and enhance our personal connections, enabling us to deliver global success to more students and partners than ever before. And next slide, please. And just as we guide students with expert advice and help them to find the right institution, we also offer strategic solutions to our institutions across three main pillars, and that's data and intelligence, marketing, and recruitment. So whether that's providing you with data and insights to aid in your strategic planning, or in this case, your recruitment travels, or delivering student volumes that meet your enrollment objectives, or diversifying across student cohorts, we will work with your institution to deliver tailored strategic solutions. Now, in terms of our global reach, we have a physical network of student-facing offices in over 30 countries, pictured here in red, and we send students to the major English-speaking countries, those highlighted in yellow. We have over 1,700 dedicated counselors throughout this network, and so we are truly embedded in the markets in which we operate, and students really trust that IDP brand and name. Now, alongside our physical network, we also have the largest digital presence of any international student service provider across our websites and our global app. We operate over 40 student-facing sites across the Hot Courses and IDP.com sites. And this map here highlights our digital presence in both blue and red. All of our sites are locally hosted, so you can see that .br for Brazil and the .vn for Vietnam and so forth. We receive over 1 million visits to these sites on an annual basis from prospective students. Now, new to IDP is IDP Events Hub, which delivers an interactive in-events experience for clients to connect with students and counselors. With Events Hub, partners can manage student leads, track event performance, and enhance their overall experience with IDP events. Now, some of the main features and benefits for clients include seeing student registration information ahead of time in order to better prepare to enhance your student interactions. You're able to track lead, boost visits, and outcomes of student discussions to understand your outcomes and ROI. Receive counselor referrals and notes from IDP staff to understand student quality and reach better qualified students during the event. You're able to download event performance data in order to support your pipeline, view, and follow-up conversations. Now, to learn more about IDP Events Hub, you can reach out to your client success manager, who would be happy to show you a demo of the service. Now, data-driven has become a bit of a buzzword lately. We all know it's beneficial to use data in decision-making, but it can also be a challenge to implement. So the next couple slides, I'll start off by looking at some of the high-level benefits and challenges of making data-driven decisions applied specifically to crafting recruitment itineraries. and then we'll discuss the different data sources available to you. So looking at the benefits when looking here, we've identified that improving ROI, recruitment travel is one of the most expensive methods available. So you want to ensure that you're maximizing every dollar spent with a demonstrable return on investment. Data insights can also justify recruitment travel and secure leadership buy-in, especially when facing limited travel resources. Using data can also help identify markets that would benefit most from an in-person visit and ultimately assisting in achieving those recruitment goals. And lastly, exploring new markets. Data can point you to the next big opportunity, leading you where intuition or past experiences might not. Now, moving to some of the challenges of having driven data itineraries. The main one here is that it takes additional time to research, sort, and make decisions based on data points. It's sometimes just easier to plan a trip based on intuition, past itineraries, or just following other institutions. Lack of expertise may be another challenge. Most international teams don't have a dedicated data scientist. So the question really becomes, how do you train or enable your recruitment team to use data when building itineraries? And the last challenge identified here is lack of data. Many institutions would like to use more data, but face poor data structure or hygiene, or don't know how to access quality data or sources. You may also be unsure of how to accurately track data during a trip and evaluate its effectiveness, and that could pose a challenge. So what data sources are we talking about when we refer to data-driven itineraries? Typically, the best recruitment strategies use a combination of sources, including sector and global data, institutional records, real-time and predictive analytics, and quality insights. And we'll dive into examples of each of these on the next slide. So starting in the upper left here, when we talk about sector and global data, there's a range of sources that institutions can use, including country-specific data like Open Doors or IRCC, IPEDS, and EduCanada, as well as global sources like World Bank, UNESCO, and UN data. You should also look at your own institutional data, including historical application, your biggest source markets and where you're seeing the most growth, and where you're seeing the highest conversion. But as we all know, these two examples of sources are looking at historical past data, and it's also important to look at the real-time, forward-looking data as well, like student demand in IDP's IQ demand tool, and real-time insights from your institutional website or social media. And finally, it's also critical to factor in qualitative insights like hearing from your in-country partners, counselors, and students themselves. These are all on-the-ground experts that you should lean on. So this last section of mine, I'll take you through some of the examples of the types of data available through IDP and how you can apply this to your recruitment traveling plans. So next slide, thank you. So when taking a look at the IDP data sources, IDP's IQ demand shows real-time dashboards providing relevant insight into international student trends using IDP's unique data across 35 source countries and over 100 million digital searches. Institutions can specifically track where in real time their engagement and interactions are coming from. And of course, there are student surveys that are conducted at least twice a year where institutions can understand the student behavior and the factors that go into their decision-making, preferences, and concerns. So looking at the IQ demand by country, so again, starting very broad, IQ demand allows you to see the overall source market demand. In this example, for Canada, we see the top 10 countries interested in Canada. Now, there are a lot of filters you can play with, and in this example, we're keeping it very broad, looking at all study levels and all programs. We have also excluded Canada as a source market for this particular example. And so what we're seeing here is that the majority of demand is coming from India, followed by Nigeria, and then Brazil, and so forth. One thing you can also notice that you can filter however many countries you'd like to see in this window. Now this next slide, we look at the demand by city level. And in this example, we find that there's 2 Nigerian cities at that top of the list. In this next slide, we're going to continue to look at that city level and add on filters to demonstrate just how granular you can get with this data. In this example, we're looking at Canada-bound demand from India only by city. We've filtered for undergraduate programs, and we've excluded majority of the tier 1 cities, allowing us to identify other opportunities. In this example, we see strong demand from Ludhiana, Chandigarh, and Kochi. From here, we can get even more granular. So we've identified that Ludhiana, Kochi, and Chandigarh are the top tier 2 cities showing undergraduate demand for Canada. You may be wondering then, what subjects are these students in these cities searching for? This dashboard lets us examine demand by subject area for these particular 3 cities. So we find that health and medicine is the top subject area. Now, from there, we can drill down even further to specific sub-disciplines that students are interested in these cities. In this example, it's medicine, nursing, and dentistry. So armed with this highly granular, real-time information on student search behavior, you can plan the most efficient recruitment trip. You'll know which cities to visit within India and which programs to highlight once you're there. Now, let's look at another example, but going the opposite direction of the previous example. Let's start off with using a search subject to identify what source markets to target. So let's just say here that we are a specialty arts college in the US, wanting to know where to recruit. IQ demand allows you to see where most demand for your specific subdiscipline is coming from. So in this particular example, we're seeing strong demand from Japan, which may justify a trip over there. Now, as an IDP digital marketing partner, you also get access to dashboards showing you real-time performance of your digital marketing campaigns on Hot Courses Abroad websites. You can get a breakdown of what countries your engagement and interactions are coming from, indicating which countries have high demand and would be good candidates for recruitment travel. This example here is showing digital marketing performance of one of our core partners in the US over a 6-month period. And I mentioned this earlier, but IDP regularly conducts wide-scale international student surveys to help understand student behaviors, preferences, and priorities. In our latest survey, Emerging Futures 3, we had over 20,000 responses from students in over 108 countries. Now, our digital partners have access to these dashboards to break down survey data by source market, destination market, study status, study level, and so forth. In this next slide, we can also get very granular with emerging futures data to find more insights for helping us plan recruitment travel. So let's use another example. Let's say we're a Canadian institution interested in recruiting in Nigeria. So using our Emerging Futures 3 survey dashboard, it lets us filter by source country. Here we can see that most Nigerian students are interested in Canada as their top choice destination. This data could help justify the decision that a recruitment trip to Nigeria is worthwhile. Now, in that second graph, we see that the second choice preference for Nigerian students who selected Canada as their first choice. So this data shows us that the US is the second choice option for most Nigerian students. With this information and with this data, we can be prepared to speak about the advantages of Canada as a study destination versus the US. So if you are looking for more information on any of the data sources available from IDP, our partnerships and our success teams are available to help collate this information and help support your decision-making and where to go. I will actually now pass it over to Katie to provide some examples from Arizona.
Awesome. Thanks, Robin. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. So next slide, I'll start by talking a little bit about who we are. So as Robin said, my name is Katie Van Wyk. I'm the Director of International Admissions at the University of Arizona. So we are a large Research 1 and Division 1 institution. There's about, currently we say 51, but based on census numbers, it looks like we're at 53,000 students. So it's a very large school. We invest a lot of money in research. We are a big athletic institution. There's over 300 programs. So just to kind of give you the breadth of what me and my team are charged with recruiting for. And then in terms of our global presence, we have about 6,000 total international students, 129 different countries, and that's across all modalities. So not all of them are here in Tucson where we're located. So part of talking about data is also like, what resources do we have? What does our office look like? And so the unit of Arizona International is pretty much everything global at the University of Arizona. And so it's a full service office. There's over 100 employees, everything from recruitment to graduation for admissions to dual degree programs to education abroad, faculty and scholars. We have a finance and marketing team. So we really are like our own little hub here at the institution with a lot of support across staff members. And then international recruitment specifically, we have a bit of an odd structure. So we have 3 directors. So I would be kind of the rest of world person. And then I have a director for China and a director for India. We have about 20 full-time staff in total. We are regionally organized, about 20 student employees, and we have in-country staff in Beijing, Dubai, New Delhi, and Mumbai. In terms of what we see as recruitment, we've invested a lot of money digitally. That I think was a big shift for most schools during the pandemic, and it's not something we've fully transitioned from. So we still put a lot of our money into digital. An average recruiter maybe takes about 2 trips, one in the fall, one in spring per year. In-country staff are traveling a lot more, but that's just to give you an idea of about how often we're hitting the ground running, which I don't think is as much as a lot of other institutions of our size. So it makes us a little bit different. And then in terms of recruitment, we also have stretch with aggregators and multiple direct contract agencies. Next slide. So when I was asked to present for this, they said, what data do you look at? And Robin went through some really great sources. And so I'll reiterate a few of those and then also talk about kind of what I look at. So of course, first and foremost is what's happening on your own campus. The University of Arizona, we are located an hour from the border with Mexico. It is very hot and dry here. It is not very similar to a lot of other US institutions. And so when we think about trends, I do put a lot of weight onto what we see specifically on our campus because it might look different than other large doctoral granting institutions in the United States. So what's happening here? Where are we establishing new relationships? We have a very large micro-campus network. Our most recent program opened in Kazakhstan, and so we tend to follow those relationships when it comes to recruiting too, even if it's not generally maybe the most up and coming market. Second, I do a lot of research on peer institutions. And so I think the biggest question that you should ask yourself is who is your peer? So at the University of Arizona, our institutional research gives us a list of peers. I agree with some, I don't agree with others from an international perspective. So you have to kind of decide who you think are your peers. So for example, I think of, Texas institutions like Texas at Austin or Texas A&M, similarly, similar geography, similar weather, similar size, but they also say like Stanford is a peer. And from an international perspective, I'm not sure that a student sees us and Stanford as the same. And so a little bit less weight maybe goes to what's happening on their campus compared to ours. And then third, what's happening across the US? This is where looking at open doors data, although old, is still somewhat relevant. I also spend a lot of time looking at Education USA resources, their global guide, and their mobility fact sheets. They actually go into how many students are at specific institutional types. So I pay most attention to where is there a changing landscape for example, doctoral granting institutions, because that's where we fit in. And then the more like nebulous areas, kind of that global data, your marketing insights, things that kind of maybe either help to reiterate what's happening on campus or maybe contradict it and make us question, like, should we be going there? So global data, like I'll look at population charts of where younger populations are growing or shrinking. We'll think about, geopolitical information, looking at maybe GDP as it goes up or down, things like the World Factbook. I use a lot of different marketing reports like IDP's dashboard. We also have our own marketing company that we utilize for digital, and they give me a biweekly report. And so it's also nice to compare like how they may be similar or different to data that we're seeing. And then last, I think this is so relevant with like AI is like the predictive analytics. I'll be honest, I have not inputted all of our student data into ChatGPT yet, but I do consider doing it often just to see what it tells me about our student information. But predictive analytics, like if we want to make a decision, like change our scholarship structure or change different actions or processes, we'll often run predictive analytics from our institutional research on U of A student data and see how it would impact like the next class if things all stayed the same. And that's also really helpful to see like, ooh, okay, is this a good choice? Or maybe we should reconsider. Next slide, thank you. So whose job is it to do all this stuff related to data? We do not have a data scientist or a data analyst in admissions. Robin mentioned at the beginning, I don't think it's super common, and unfortunately we do not. So it falls a lot to me as well as our recruiters. So especially on the research front, I will often pull a lot of the data from the sources I just mentioned, maybe put it in like a clean Excel spreadsheet. We like to call them our regional game plans. And then I'll give it to my recruiter for them to do additional research and add some of those like anecdotes that they're seeing in order for us to make decisions about where they might need to be. A lot of that research is, as we all know, recruitment, it takes time. If we go to an event, we don't often see immediate return on it. So we have to go back maybe 2-3 years, looking at that event over time and what maybe enrollment looks like. So it is quite time consuming to really make strong, good decisions. But kind of creating that regional game plan helps us with a starting point to focus in on where we want to go and where we want to see improvement this next year. And then on the other side, when students are actually starting to apply or express interest and they go into our CRM, we're a slate school. That's when we start to be able to have kind of more concrete tracking. And so that's a combination of myself and a data analyst role on our ISS team. They utilize Synapsys, we use Slate, and then the institution SMS is PeopleSoft. And so the three all kind of share data so we all can report on similar things. And just to give you an idea of things that I send out to my team on a regular basis so they feel kind of like data informed in their day to day. I send out a weekly point in time report of where we are today compared to the last 3 years, and I do it every single week so they can see application data as it relates to the last 3 years. We do regional reports on their prospects, their applicants, admits, kind of guiding who they reach out to, and that is also a weekly report. And then we do a semesterly like enrollment report at the start of each semester. And then similarly, our ISS team shares a lot of data with us that helps us make decisions about like yield events or where we want to recruit the next semester based on like I-20 and check-in data. And so those tend to be weekly leading up to the start of a semester. So there's a lot of numbers all the time kind of being thrown around. And that also is quite challenging because it means if you're constantly flooded with information, it's hard to also make good decisions. So we try to have it accessible and available, but not something that like I quiz my team on a weekly basis. Let's just say that. Next slide. Awesome. The third piece that I wanted to mostly talk about is synergy. So especially if you're working at a large institution or one where international is done across many different departments, how do we work towards aligning like all of our campus efforts towards a common goal? And so I separated this into kind of 3 areas. The first is, in-country recruitment, where do we go? It's of course based on data and the research that we're doing, but it also is access to different opportunities. So for example, everything in the data could be pointing like we need to go to Japan. But like if there's no event, there's no fair, if there's no existing relationships, just buying a flight to Tokyo really isn't like the best decision. And so it has to be a combination of where do we have relationships, where do we need to build relationships, and then access to different opportunities to engage. So it has to be kind of all of them coming together. The second piece is I will never travel somewhere unless we're already doing digital marketing and spending money to promote our brand so that there is some awareness. So typically digital is like the first plan we make, and then in-country recruitment is the second, and it should always kind of pair well with where we're doing digital marketing. I also think digital is the best space for where you can't travel for safety or security reasons, or where you're trying to explore a new market, because it is a lot cheaper to put out ads somewhere than jump on a plane and participate in a fair for the first time. And then last, I mentioned this before briefly, but like university-wide efforts. So where do we have dual degree programs? Where do faculty, do research? Where do we have up and coming relationships? Some departments will call us and say, we have a priority of increasing enrollment from this country because of, employment opportunities. And so we have to kind of synergize all of them together. So just to give you an example, last year, our digital marketing, um, we were we were promoting throughout South America, for example, in Peru, Ecuador, Chile, Colombia, and Brazil. Then we paired in country just in Colombia and Brazil, and then kind of watched to see what happened over the course of the year. We saw much better returns in Peru, so this year we've shifted, and now Peru is where we're traveling. We're taking maybe a break from Colombia, for example. So we always have to be kind of monitoring um, where we're spending money, how the return is digitally, and then what we want to be doing for travel. Um, so how has it changed? I think it's ever changing. We do not come up with like a full year plan and then say like this is it. Like I said, I'm watching point in time reports every single week. So if we're seeing a decline in places that we should be seeing like consistency or an increase, then that changes recruitment and maybe we add a trip that we weren't planning before. Um, we also have increased our digital spend substantially and then decreased time in country. This has worked well for us, but I also, we're still kind of fresh out of the pandemic. I can't say that that's going to continue to be our trajectory. And then we've increased a lot of in-country staff. So things, dwindled down during the pandemic. Since then, we have increased 2 more people in India. We've reinvested in China and we moved someone to Dubai. So trying to limit the amount of money we spend from traveling from Tucson and increasing our in-country representation in very key markets. So that's a little bit about us, and I'm going to pass it over to Gordon to take it away.
Thank you, Katie. So I'm going to talk about Okanagan College, sort of our experience, and give you a little bit of our background, talk about our retention officer position, and kind of how we do things here. So we're a little bit different. It was interesting listening to Katie and when we were having conversations earlier, because we do things differently for various reasons. So we are a public institution. We're located in South Central British Columbia. We have 4 campuses and about a head count of about 10,000 students, although the number is about 17,000 when we add continuing studies and part-time, etc. Right now, as of this fall, we are just under 2,000 international students. That's a 44% increase from where it was last year. We have students from only 69 countries as opposed to Katie's 129, but we keep growing. But one of our keys was really diversification. We wanted to have students from many different countries for various reasons. We didn't want too many students from any one country in any of our communities that we're serving. So we've had to kind of balance what we do with what our goals are. And we find that most of our programs are full, so we only have so many seats to fill. Our actual international office is a full service team, right from recruitment to graduation. We have immigration advising, education advising, all of the regular sort of services that you would expect in a post-secondary institution. We do our recruitment a little bit different than others. About 80% of our students are coming through educational agents from around the world, a lot through the large agencies and companies such as IDP and Apply Board. So we have actually 5 full-time recruitment specialists, and our recruitment specialists each have markets that they look after, and they tend to visit the major markets at least twice a year. We currently have no in-country reps, although we have used them in the past in a couple of different markets and in growing markets. And we have had some success, but we've stayed with and grown our recruitment team and then really develop our relationships. We moved away from a lot of the fairs and doing events, and we do our own events or events with our key agents. And we do very little in the way of fairs. We changed our commission structure and kind of have really worked on the agent relationship, seeing how 80% of our students do come through agents. So we'll move on to the next slide. and I'll talk about where we get our sources of data and information. So IDP, Apply Board, IRCC, the trade commissioners. We work with trade commissioners around the world. We use a lot of other sources, such as CBIE, Canadian Bureau of International Education, BCCIE, the British Columbia Council for International Education, the PI News, ICEF, and on it goes. And we found during the pandemic, there was a lot more webinars that we could attend, and it was really great for getting a lot of information. And so we tend to do a lot of webinars. We get a lot of information from these sources. But what we do internally is something that we've worked on for about 6 years now. So we'll move to the next slide, and I'm going to talk about our retention officer. So we don't call this our data specialist. We made it a retention officer position, and the position is really our keeper of data. And so that person is a full-time individual who works with our recruitment team, reports directly to me as the director, and really just works on statistics and numbers. And then another part of their job is overseeing our mobility program. We get a weekly report each semester. We get we meet once a week face to face as a team, and we get application data. So all of our applications for the upcoming semesters, how many applications we have, how many seats we have, how many deposits have been paid, how many applications, letters of admission have been sent that we're waiting for payments, how many applications are still sitting there. Then we use a formula to figure out how many our anticipated enrollment, and then how many more applications we need to fill the program. And we use historical data to come up with percentages for all of those. We share that information weekly with all of our program deans. And so when a program is getting close to full, it is only the dean that can close applications or international applications. So often they say, oh, we have so many applications for this program, we're going to close it. And we say, well, just a minute, we're going to drill down into that data to see where are the applications coming from? Is it a country where maybe there's a lower success rate of getting study permits? So, and then as we get close to the start of each semester, we track all study permit approvals. So we know exactly how many students we can expect. And when we do our prediction about a month before the start of the semester, we're usually within 30 students of what we think we're going to get. So but of course our numbers aren't super high. We're in the, several hundred. So you can see there some of the data we get. We also get and ask our data specialist, our retention officer, to do specific reports. So if we're going to a country, we want to have data on that country. How have our numbers been going? What kind of applications we're getting? They do surveys. We look at conversion rates. We look at where our students are coming from. And so we're constantly looking at this, and that helps us to make decisions on where we want to go, how much money we want to spend. But again, when I talked earlier about our diversity, there are certain markets where we will travel to, even though we don't have a high percentage of students from that area, because we want the diversity. And we usually will combine that with another, with a marketing trip we're already doing. So we're in the region, we want to grow in another country close to that area, and we'll travel into that area as well. So this position has been really a huge help for us in making our decisions. And we have a new person starting because we moved the person out who was doing it into an advising role. And our new person is a graduate of our marketing and data analytics program, so has amazing skills. And so the previous person keeps saying, oh, the data you're going to get moving forward is going to be even better than anything I ever produced. So we're looking forward to Monday when the new person starts. Give us a couple of weeks and we'll see where we're at. So we'll move to the next slide. How do we go about making our decisions? So our system, again, a little bit different than others. Perhaps we do an annual budget submission to senior administration, and we have to do that every fall for the next year. So we do it, we pick a number based on what we've spent in the past, what we think we're going to spend, and that goes in. We always put a little bit of a cushion in there because we know that there might be a new market that comes up or an event we have to attend. So we always have a bit of a variance there. And we do an annual travel plan, and we do that in early in the calendar year. So usually February, March, our team gets together, we decide who's going where when, and again, we make that plan, and then we don't have to stick to it, but it's a general plan of who's going where when, also so that we have coverage in the office while recruiters are away traveling, and then we do change it as we go. Now, before each recruitment trip, even though we've approved and we have a plan of who's going where when, each of our recruitment specialists has to submit a travel approval plan. That is a budget and a bit of a schedule of what they're going to do. Then once it's approved, they can start booking their travel and making their schedule and then update it as they go. And then once they come back, they do a follow-up with the marketing team, what they did, how things work, what worked, what didn't perhaps, what would they maybe do differently, but also it helps us for others planning their trips. So we do this on an ongoing basis. As I said, our marketing team meets once a week, whether we're all here or not. And we also include our a couple of other key members of our team in that and bring in guests. If there's new program initiatives that we need to sell, we'll have the dean or a chair come in and talk about that so the recruiters know exactly what they're selling to potential students. So we'll go to our next slide. And I will talk about our digital marketing and kind of our social media, what we did, where we're at, what we saw. And it's a little bit almost opposite of what you've done, Katie, which is interesting. So pre-COVID, we were spending a little bit of money on our social media. We of course have our Facebook and our Instagram accounts, and we post a lot and students love that. But as far as social media marketing, prior to COVID, we were spending a little bit of money and usually in either markets we were going to travel to or markets we wanted to grow. And then during COVID, when we weren't traveling, we put a lot more money into our social media, which got us a lot of interest in applications. It worked very well. Post-COVID, we looked at the numbers we were spending and we said, gee, we're spending a lot of money. Let's bring that down and let's just make a priority for brand awareness in our emerging markets, because the markets that we're doing really well in, let's not spend the money because we're traveling there twice a year anyway. So when we're traveling, we will promote any in-country events through our social media ads and posts. And then we work with our college relations team to track all our reports and review the reports that we get from Meta. And we also track inquiries to see if are we getting a lot of inquiries as a result of maybe doing a campaign in a country like Ghana or things like that. And that's kind of how we've done it, and it has worked for us. And I think, is that my last slide? I can't remember. I got one more there. Nope, that is it. So we're up to questions.
Thank you both so much. I did see a question come in to you, Gordon, and it says, how are you collecting study permit approved or denied information from individual students?
Right. So what we do is we ask all of our students and agents to submit their study permit information. So when they've applied for their study permit, when they've received it, and then we also have them submit their travel plan. Now, we don't always get them. So our retention officer, that position also surveys all of our applicants to say, hey, where are you at with study permit? And that information goes into our system. And then when we do our pre-arrival orientations and our virtual sessions, we also track there and we say, hey, have you got your study permit? And the data is tracked through there. So we have a pretty good handle on it. And then we add that into our weekly report that goes out to deans and our team, usually about 6 weeks prior to the start of the semester. We start publishing that data so that we can see, yes, we think we have this many students, but actually this is how many actually have study permits. And so that really helps us in making our decisions.
I have another question here, but perhaps, Katie, I know you answered this to the individual, but there was a question directed to you of what kind of digital marketing do you do, social media or other channels? You just want to just provide a couple comments there.
Yeah, no problem. So our digital marketing is primarily through like Google Ads, but then we do quite a bit now on YouTube and Instagram as well. Arizona was a school that did say no to TikTok, so we previously had TikTok ads as well, but and we do a lot on YouTube for video, Instagram, and then mostly Google like redirection.
Okay, I do have two questions. I'll read the first one. How do you submit that visa information, email, CRM, or so this must be related to you, Gordon, from the trade commissioners. But you know what? Maybe I'll get the person to it's a follow-up email. Let's go with the second question, and perhaps someone else can have you worked within embassies or with embassies to participate in recruitment events? If so, what's the process to do this?
We have, and I'll let Katie answer as well. We have for a number of years, we did embassy events. We sometimes will do them in new markets. We've stopped doing most of those. But we do, every time we're in a country, we meet with the trade commissioners at the embassies abroad. And that's worked really well. We start meeting with them prior to a trip. We meet with them when we're there in country. They give us a lot of information. They sometimes are helping us with our plans of what we want to do, where we want to go. And they've been essential in helping us really. The Trade Commissioner Service is really good for us. And I'll turn it over to Katie for the American experience with that.
Yeah. We do a lot of activities with like the Education USA arm. Specifically, they'll do tours and events, although the price has gone up, so we're doing less of those this year. We do also work on the trade commission side as well, just to get like insights and data, but I wouldn't say we're doing like events at the embassy, no. But occasionally we'll participate in things that they coordinate.
A question for you both. What is the best data app that performs better for you all? Aside from IDP, of course. I'm just kidding.
I would say the IDP and ApplyBoard are our two biggest sources. We also, there's a lot of information from IRCC as well in Canada, and so we use all of those sources. I can't say one is better than the other. You really look at all of them, and the information is often very similar.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. I don't think I look at one specific data app. That's like, yeah. We look at a lot of different things, and so they're all very helpful. And I think, like Gordon said, sometimes they kind of fill in the gaps for things that you think you already know, and you just want a little more insight in.
Katie, there's another question for you specifically, and it says here, can you say more about the in-country staff positions you have in India, China, and the UAE? Are they full-time or part-time? What are their responsibilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So all of them are full-time staff members. We call our recruiters enrollment counselors. Their job is really to support a student from inquiry to enrollment. And so they have access to our online systems for follow-up email or phone communication, helping students through the application process. So while they are a recruiter and their job is to go to different events and to raise brand awareness and to get students to apply, they also are charged with helping the students through that application process. So it's kind of like similar to what you would have for an educational agent, only they're reporting up through us. Maybe have some of the same perks as institutional employees, but their primary responsibilities are inquiry to enrollment for individuals in that country. And when it comes to India, because we have 4, they are geographically split. So like our application system, when a student says, I'm from Delhi, they get automatically assigned to this person and pull into their reports and their tasks and whatnot.
Okay. Thank you. Another question just came in. What is your best strategy for diversifying your student population? The great majority of our 3 students come from 3 countries. So
I think one of the things that you want to look at is, are there secondary markets that are in the same area? So we've been working on with our recruitment specialists for India, for example, which is, of course, most people's biggest market in Canada, is what secondary markets can we utilize that are close by? So a year ago, or actually not even a year ago, last winter, we made our first trip to Nepal, and we actually did an event with CI Can, and we have students as a result. So we were looking at Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Pakistan as kind of diversification within that area. And then, so what we will do is our recruitment specialists, when they go to India, will visit a couple of those countries each time. We've done the same in other major markets where we kind of look at other nearby countries where there's success. We've just ventured into Africa within the last year. We've been recruiting in Africa kind of on the side of the desk, if you will, and virtually for a number of years, and always had about just a small number of students. And as a result of traveling to Africa a couple of times and really building our relationships, and we're in two major countries, which is Nigeria and Zimbabwe, where we get probably 90% of our African students, and they're about 50-50 between those two countries. But we've gone into other countries as well, again, close by, and we're looking at data. Where were inquiries coming from? Where were there good visa success rates? Where did we have relationships, either IDP offices or agencies that we're working with, or apply board? And so we've gone into Ghana, Tanzania, and we're looking at Kenya and South Africa next, as well as others. So, we make those decisions based on information, again, data driven, because you must.
Do you want me to speak on that as well?
Sure.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest things is like you need institutional buy-in to diversify your population, because it will take time. With a lot of markets, like you might go in for the first time, it might take a few years to generate some brand awareness, some stability, and then ultimately applications. So I would say that, like, first you need to have institutional buy-in that they're going to commit for like 3 years if you're trying somewhere new to diversify. And then two, I'll just echo Gordon, is like watching kind of these numbers of places that maybe we've never been, or where we're not marketing digitally, but we're seeing, interest from IDP's platform, or we're seeing interest from students that are reaching out, but we haven't really done a lot there. That's when I'll start to like dig in a little bit deeper. But definitely, watching kind of US data in general for me of like, where are we not seeing students that other institutions are, is a nice way to help diversify. But yeah, same idea, is watching those data sources, and making sure that we have institutional investment, because otherwise it's not necessarily worthwhile.
Yeah, I would add one thing, Katie. It's really interesting because I always used to say it was the 3-year, 3 visits. The first visit, they kind of look at you and, are you real? Second visit, they kind of go, okay, this is legit and this is maybe going to happen. And the third visit, you start to see results. But I found in some of the newer markets, we're getting the results a lot faster. We went into the Philippines, and within a year, we had good numbers, and they've doubled pretty much every year. So it's interesting, but I agree that it used to take longer. I'm finding in some markets now it's a much quicker, and that could be based on historical kind of relationships between our two countries, where there's a lot of awareness in the Philippines of Canada, and 1 in 40 Canadians has Filipino roots. So there's a lot of buy-in already. So once we went there, we got the students very quickly. So sometimes it does go quicker, but usually it's the 3 visits or 3 years. 3 cups of tea.
Just had another question come in. It's sort of on the tail end of that. My school has really frowned on African travel, often based on Government of Canada travel advice. How do you advise we work to build institutional commitment to interesting markets like Nigeria?
Yeah, so it was interesting. We do look at the global affairs travel advisories. And so when we decided we were going to go into Nigeria, and we were going to do this about 5 years ago, and it was the travel advisories that stopped us from going in country. So because we had agents that we were working with that, I don't want to say we're guaranteeing our safety, but we had people who we were working with on the ground. So if you have agents that you can work with that can kind of help you, certainly connect with the trade commissioners. The trade commissioner there was somewhat helpful as well. And so we planned a very short visit into Nigeria. Now, again, when you look at that, the cost of going to Africa from Canada is very expensive. So we combined it. We went through the UAE, through Dubai, because we have connections there where we get a lot of expats. So we went to Dubai first, then we went to Nigeria and Zimbabwe. And in Zimbabwe, we only work with one main agent. And we're doing the same thing in Ghana. We're just working with two partners. And one is IDP, of course, through, and I'm drawing a blank on intake. Yes, thank you. Yes, there. The merger. And so we went in and we only did a short time in each country, 4 days kind of thing. But we did it very carefully. We did not go to, we only went to Lagos because there was a travel advisory for other cities. And so we got in and got out. And we learned that, where we stayed the first time, we probably wouldn't stay the second time, and we didn't. And we stayed in another area, which was a little bit more expensive, but also we felt more secure. And because we also talked to our students here before we went and got information from them and got kind of their take on what we should and shouldn't do. And we were told, oh, you got to have money ready for bribes at the immigration, which we didn't have to do, but I was prepared for it. I had things, and it was a very interesting trip. And I could certainly, the individual, if they want to reach out to me, I would certainly talk to them more about how we went into Africa and made it work.
Got another question here. How realistic is this data-based planning when recruiters are working on their annual plan? How do you build this ethos in the team? Who would like to?
Katie, do you want to start on that one?
Sure. I think I said before, like, we send out a lot of data reports to the team just to help them be, data informed, I feel like, in their day-to-day. And so I try to help a lot with that by kind of cleaning things up in a very digestible way for each of the team members, so that when we sit down to start working on their plans, they can also very clearly see, okay, this is what our data is saying, and this is kind of where we want to go from here. Now let's talk about maybe the intricacies of a market, or add in the agency relationships and different things into that planning. So I do try to do a lot of it for them to make it digestible, because I think if I were to just send them all these massive Excel spreadsheets and said, use this, it would definitely be a lot harder. And so that's work, I guess, that I choose to do in order to make them think about it a little bit more. I also will say they ask often about kind of current metrics in their regions. And so that is where I started building regional reports so they can see day to day, how well they're doing. And I think that is very encouraging, because as we see application numbers and admitted student numbers go up, they're much more enthusiastic about going to a destination or incorporating into their plan, because they're seeing that the work that they're doing is successful. So I will say that has helped as well.
Anything to add, Gordon?
I would say what we do is when we have our weekly meetings, we look at our numbers, and luckily all 5 recruiters have countries in the top 10 markets. So it's a friendly, I don't want to call it a competition, but we kind of have jokes, somebody's getting too many students, somebody's not getting enough, and how do you balance that off? But what it does is it creates a sort of a team atmosphere where people support each other, and they say, hey, I noticed your numbers in X country aren't doing that great. What are you doing there? What's working? What agents are you working with? Because I've got agents in my country who actually have offices in your country that maybe we can make something happen there. So there's a lot of collaboration, and we've moved our markets around. Nobody is stuck with any one market. Well, actually somebody is, no. Usually for any length of time, we do move the markets around based on a number of factors, what makes sense geographically. And then when we're adding new markets, if somebody all of a sudden has 3 big growth markets and they're spending a lot of time on them, maybe we have to move their portfolio about. But it's that constant, and I think by, as Katie said, sending out the information, we do the face-to-face once a week, and it's really helped develop that team atmosphere and the support for each other.
Awesome. Okay, I think this is the last question before we wrap up here. This question here is, in our institution, admissions and international student services are separate offices. What are the benefits or challenges of combining these offices in your experiences as it relates to student recruitment? Anyone like to?
I'll start with that and then turn it over to Katie if that's okay. So many years ago, because I've been in our institution for many years, over 20 in this department, we used to have our admissions team in our office, and they were part of our office. And then almost 15 years ago, they were moved to the admissions office, and so they don't report to us. And we did look at bringing them back under our last VP. She said, do you want them back in your office? And we didn't have space for them. That was the big thing. But we've developed a really good relationship with them. We include them in our weekly meetings. They're invited every time. They get all the reports. They get to kind of see the experience that the recruiters have. When they come to the meetings, they get excited about what's going on. And they each of the admissions team have specific regions and countries that they look after. So they work very closely with the marketing representatives that we have. So again, it's that relationship. So even though they're separate, it works well if you include them and you have kind of, and the associate registrar and registrar also are part of our team. In fact, the associate registrar comes to all of our marketing meetings or is invited every week as well. And again, it's that relationship. Katie, go ahead. Sorry.
No, yeah, that's great. I would agree. Like, you've got to get them involved. And so if they are a separate office, making sure that they're participating or they're getting your reports. In our case, so international admissions and international student services, we all report up through the same kind of reporting lines under all things international. And we also sit next to each other. And I find that to be very, very beneficial, that one of my recruiters can get up and walk over to the ISS team and say, hey, did you issue this I-20? You know, what's going on with it? Or when a student arrives and they're looking for us, they actually have just found the office that they actually need because now they've arrived to the ISS office instead of admissions. So I think it works really, really well in terms of like the synergy with our teams. Sponsorship is also one that I think comes up a lot. And the sponsor relationships are actually managed by our ISS team because they have to manage, billing and making sure that students are retaining and that they're maintaining their academics. And so we bring them on recruiting trips when we go, but like that relationship is ultimately held by them. And so it's really nice that we sit close together for that purpose too. Same as Gordon, international was part of admissions and it wasn't. Sometimes they talk about going back, but I will say that because of all the things happening internationally, it makes a lot of sense for us to be in an international office where we can work with other people, study abroad, dual degrees that are also doing things overseas, and try to synergize. So I think there's a lot of benefits, but happy to kind of write them all down for you if you need motivation for your school.
We also bring gifts back for the admissions team from whenever we're traveling. They really appreciate that.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much, Katie and Gordon, for sharing your insights and your experiences when it comes to planning travel using data points. Thank you to everyone that tuned in for today's webinar. We will be sharing a recording as well as the slides and a follow-up email. And then just as soon as we end, there will be a survey, and we do evaluate and appreciate everyone's feedback. So you can take a minute to fill it out. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful Tuesday. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.